The park was quiet in the way winter mornings often are, not empty, just resting. Pale sunlight filtered through bare branches, dusting the snow with a soft silver glow. A single bench sat near the path, its wooden slats cold and untouched, as if waiting for something, or someone. That was when people began to notice the dog. He sat beside the bench, not curled up for warmth, not wandering in search of food, but sitting upright, alert. His breath rose in gentle clouds as he watched the path with calm focus. Every few minutes, his tail would tap the snow once, softly, as if in recognition of something unseen. A woman passing by slowed her steps. She smiled at first, assuming the dog belonged to someone nearby. But no leash tugged. No voice called his name. Still, the dog didn't move. He simply looked down the path again, ears lifting slightly, as though listening for a familiar rhythm. As the days passed, others noticed him too. The dog returned each morning, always to the same spot, always beside the same bench. Someone left a scarf nearby. Another placed a cup of warm water. The dog accepted the kindness, but never the invitation to leave. There was something purposeful in the way he waited. Not anxious. Not lost. Connected. One afternoon, a man sat on the bench, brushing snow from the seat. The dog glanced at him, then gently leaned against his leg for just a moment before stepping back into place. The man felt it, a quiet emotion he couldn't name, and for reasons he didn't understand, his eyes stung. Whatever the dog was waiting for, it wasn't just habit. It was a promise. And what the dog sensed would change everything. Winter arrived quietly that year. Not with storms. Not with drama. Just a soft settling of cold into the park. The trees stood bare, their branches thin and still, tracing pale lines against a washed blue sky. Snow covered the ground in a smooth, untouched layer, broken only by a winding path that curved through the park like a slow thought. Near that path sat a bench. Old. Wooden. Familiar. Its slats were dusted with snow, the metal arms cold to the touch. It wasn't special. It didn't face a lake or a monument. It simply rested there halfway between the playground and the far line of trees, as if it had always been meant to wait. On most mornings, the park belonged to routine. A jogger passed just after sunrise, breath steady, shoes crunching softly. An older man walked his dog farther down the path, never stopping. A woman pushed a stroller, bundled tight, humming under her breath. And then, there was him. The dog appeared just after the sun cleared the trees. Medium-sized. Thick winter coat. For the color of warm earth, dusted lighter along his chest and muzzle. His paws pressed into the snow with care, not rushing, not wandering. He went straight to the bench. Not beneath it. Not on it. Beside it. He sat down neatly, tail wrapped close to his body, posture calm and alert. His ears lifted slightly, catching distant sounds, footsteps, wind through branches, the faint echo of the city beyond the park. Then he looked down the path. Not scanning wildly. Not anxious. Focused. As if he knew exactly where to look. A jogger slowed when she noticed him. She smiled instinctively. Most people did. Dogs had a way of pulling smiles from strangers without effort. She glanced around, expecting to see someone nearby, a leash, a phone, a voice calling softly. Nothing. Still, the dog didn't move. He didn't follow her. Didn't whine. Didn't shiver. He simply waited. A few minutes later, a man approached the bench, brushing snow from the seat before sitting. The dog shifted his gaze briefly, eyes warm but uninterested, then returned his attention to the path. The man hesitated. Hey there, buddy, he said quietly. The dog turned his head, just enough to acknowledge the sound. His tail gave one gentle tap against the snow. Once. Then stillness again. The man felt something tighten in his chest, not worry exactly. Curiosity. The kind that settles slowly, like a thought you don't yet have words for. Yours? He asked the empty park. The dog didn't answer. He didn't need to. Minutes passed. Then more. The cold pressed in, but the dog didn't curl up for warmth. He stayed upright, balanced, as if standing guard over the space beside the bench. Every so often, his ears would lift. His head would tilt. And for a moment, just a moment, it looked like recognition. But no one came. By mid-morning, the bench had been visited and left behind more times than the dog could count. Each person noticed him. Each person paused. Some smiled and moved on. Some whispered to him. One woman set her gloves on the bench and sat quietly for a while, sharing the silence. The dog allowed it. But he never shifted from his place. By afternoon, someone left a small container of water near the bench. Another draped a scarf over the backrest, bright against the white snow. The dog accepted the kindness with a polite glance. He drank. He sniffed the scarf. Then he sat back down. The sun dipped lower, light warming briefly before fading into blue shadows. The park thinned out, the air growing sharper. And still, he waited. When the sky began to darken, the dog finally stood. Not abruptly. Not reluctantly. He looked down the path one last time, ears forward, breath visible in the cold air. Then he turned and walked away. The next morning, the bench was still there. So was the snow. And just after sunrise, the dog returned. Same path. Same pace. Same spot beside the bench. This time, people noticed sooner. This again, someone murmured. A man stopped and crouched nearby, concern flickering across his face. You okay, boy? The dog glanced at him, calm, steady, then turned back toward the path. As if to say, not yet. Word spread quietly. Not through phones or posts, but through repetition. The dog by the bench. He's back again. He waits there every day. Someone called animal services. They came, observed, waited. The dog wasn't lost. He wasn't distressed. He wasn't alone. He was waiting. And as the days passed, something began to settle over the park, something warm and quiet and unspoken. The bench was no longer just a bench. And the dog's waiting had meaning no one expected. Morning arrived gently again. Not with urgency. Not with noise. Just a slow brightening of the sky, the cold easing slightly as the sun rose higher than it had the day before. The snow still lay thick across the park, but it carried faint signs of life now, footprints layered over footprints, proof that people had begun to expect the dog's presence. And right on time. He came back. From the same direction. At the same unhurried pace. His paws pressed familiar shapes into the snow, as if retracing something already written. His coat caught the light, warm against the pale ground, his breath steady as he approached the bench. He didn't hesitate. He never did. He walked straight to the spot beside the bench. And sat. Tail tucked close. Back straight. Eyes forward. Waiting. A woman who lived nearby slowed when she saw him. She'd noticed him yesterday too, had mentioned him to her husband over dinner, wondering out loud if someone was missing their dog. She stopped this time. Hey, sweetheart, she said softly, crouching down a few steps away. You're back. The dog turned his head just enough to meet her eyes. His gaze was calm. Clear. Present. Not pleading. Not confused. She smiled, but it faltered at the edges. You waiting for someone? She asked, almost joking. The dog's ears lifted. Just slightly. He looked back down the path. The woman followed his gaze. There was nothing there, just the curve of the walkway disappearing between trees. Still, something about the way the dog watched made her straighten unconsciously, as if she too were expecting someone to appear. Minutes passed. She stood again, brushing snow from her knees. Well, she said quietly. I hope they come soon. The dog didn't move. As the morning unfolded, the bench became a quiet gathering point. Not crowded, just noticed. People slowed without realizing why. Some lingered longer than planned. A man with a thermos stopped and poured a little warm water into a spare cup, setting it down nearby. A teenager snapped a photo, then lowered his phone, suddenly unsure it was the right thing to do. An older couple sat together in silence, coats zipped high, hands clasped. Through it all, the dog stayed exactly where he was. Occasionally, he shifted his weight. Occasionally, he stretched his legs. But his attention never drifted. Every sound was considered. Every footstep evaluated. Not with tension, but with hope. By the third day, people had started talking. Not loudly. Not dramatically. Just small exchanges, passing comments. He's been here every morning. Same time. Same spot. Animal control returned, more deliberately this time. They approached slowly, careful not to startle him. One of them knelt nearby, offering a gentle hand. "Hey, buddy," the man said. "Let's see if you've got a tag." The dog looked at him calmly. Then, very gently, he stepped back into his place beside the bench. Not resisting. Not fearful. Just returning. The man paused. "Well," he murmured to his partner. "He's not going anywhere." They stayed for a while, observing. The dog's posture never changed. His breathing stayed even. His eyes followed the path with unwavering attention. Finally, they stood. "He's healthy," one of them said. "Clean. Federal. And not lost," the other added. They left him there. That afternoon, snow began to fall again, light flakes drifting down like whispers. Someone placed a small blanket near the bench, folding it neatly. The dog sniffed it, stepped around it, and sat back down. Still waiting. That night, long after the park had emptied, a man walking home late passed the bench. He stopped when he saw the dog silhouetted beneath a street lamp, snow collecting softly along his back. "You should be inside," the man said gently. The dog looked at him, eyes reflecting the warm yellow light, and for just a second, something flickered there. Memory. The man swallowed hard, suddenly unsure why his chest felt heavy. "You'll be here tomorrow, won't you?" he asked quietly. The dog didn't answer. But the next morning, he was. Same time. Same bench. By now, people expected him. Some brought treats. Some brought coffee and sat nearby. Some brought nothing at all, just their presence. Children asked questions. Parents whispered guesses. But no one tried to move him anymore. Because it was clear. This wasn't wandering. This wasn't habit. It was devotion. The dog wasn't waiting because he was lost. He was waiting because he remembered. And as the cold days continued, the bench became something more than a place to sit. It became a promise made visible. And slowly, quietly, the people who passed through the park began to feel it too. Something had happened here. Something that mattered. And whatever it was, the dog hadn't forgotten. By the end of the week, the park felt different. Not changed in any way you could point to, but softened. The bench no longer blended into the background. It carried a quiet gravity now, pulling attention without asking for it. People approached more slowly, their steps unconsciously matching the stillness that seemed to live there. And the dog. He noticed everything. He noticed the rhythm of footsteps, which once passed without pause, which once slowed. He noticed voices high and light, low and tired. He noticed the way some people smiled when they saw him, and the way others grew quiet. Each morning, he arrived the same way. Straight path. Calm pace. Purposeful. He settled beside the bench, his body angled just enough to see both the path ahead and the space where someone might sit. His posture wasn't rigid, but it wasn't relaxed either. It was attentive. A young boy stopped one morning, tugging gently on his father's sleeve. "Dad," he whispered. "Why is he sitting there?" The father hesitated, unsure how to answer. "I think," he said slowly, "I think he's waiting." "For what?" The man looked at the bench. At the dog. At the empty space beside him. "For someone," he said quietly. The boy crouched a few feet away, careful not to cross an invisible line. The dog glanced at him, soft eyes, steady gaze, then returned his attention to the path. The boy watched him for a long moment. "He looks like he knows," the boy said. The father nodded. So did others. People began sitting on the bench more often now, not to rest, exactly, but to be close. Some stayed only a minute. Some stayed longer, wrapped in coats and thoughts. The dog accepted them all. He didn't lean into everyone. Didn't seek attention. But sometimes, if someone sat quietly enough, he would shift closer. Just enough to touch. A knee. A coat sleeve. A gloved hand resting at their side. It was never sudden. Always gentle. A woman who came every morning before work began bringing 2 coffees. She'd set one on the bench beside her, untouched, and sipped the other slowly. "I don't know why I keep doing that," she murmured one morning, watching steam rise from the cup. "Feels wrong not to." The dog's ears lifted. He didn't look at the cup. He looked down the path. Animal Services checked again. Different people this time. They scanned for microchips. Made notes. Talked in low voices. One of them knelt and scratched gently behind the dog's ear. "Good boy," she said softly. The dog closed his eyes for a brief second. Then opened them again. Still waiting. By now, there were small signs of care scattered around the bench: a folded blanket, a scarf, a note taped quietly to the backrest. "He waits here every morning. Please be kind." No one knew who wrote it. But everyone respected it. The dog became part of the park's rhythm. Joggers slowed their pace near the bench. Cyclists rang bells earlier, as if not to startle him. People spoke softer. Watching him had a way of quieting things. One afternoon, a man in his 30s sat down heavily on the bench, shoulders slumped. He didn't notice the dog at first. He stared at the snow, breath uneven. After a few minutes, the dog stood. He stepped closer and rested his head gently against the man's knee. Not pushing. Not demanding. Just there. The man stiffened, then exhaled. His hand moved on its own, fingers pressing into warm fur. "Thanks," he whispered, voice catching. "I didn't know I needed that." The dog stayed for a moment longer. Then returned to his place. That night, someone left a small laminated sign tucked beneath the bench. "Waiting isn't lonely when love is involved." No one removed it. As days passed, the watching eyes multiplied. People no longer asked if the dog was waiting. They asked why. Some guessed an owner who never came back. Some whispered about a routine broken by winter. Some simply felt the weight of it without naming it. And through it all, the dog remained constant. Same spot. Same focus. Every sound down the path still made his ears lift. Every approaching figure still drew his attention. Hope never faded. It stayed quiet and warm, settled deep in his chest. Because whatever he was waiting for, it wasn't gone. Not to him. And as more people watched, as more hearts leaned quietly toward the bench, the mystery deepened. Not with fear, but with meaning. By the second week, the park had learned how to sit with the dog. Not to study him. Not to solve him. Just to be with him. The bench became a place where people slowed on purpose. Where phones stayed in pockets. Where conversations trailed off into quiet. No one announced their arrival anymore. They simply approached, brushed snow aside, and sat. The dog accepted this new rhythm without surprise. Each morning, he arrived as always at the same path, the same calm steps. He settled beside the bench, tail resting against the snow, breath steady. But something had shifted. He wasn't just waiting now. He was sharing the weight. An older woman came most afternoons, her walk careful and measured. She carried a small thermos and a folded cushion under one arm. She placed the cushion on the bench, sat, and poured tea into the lid. She never spoke at first. Neither did the dog. They sat together like that for several minutes each day, the woman sipping slowly, the dog watching the path. Sometimes she would sigh, a long sound that carried more weight than words. One day, she finally spoke. "My husband used to sit here," she said quietly, eyes on the trees. "He liked to watch people go by." The dog's ears lifted. She smiled faintly. "I don't know why I'm telling you that." The dog shifted closer, just enough that his shoulder brushed her coat. She rested her hand there. Didn't move it. A college student started stopping by in the evenings, backpack slung low, earbuds forgotten. He'd sit on the far end of the bench, scrolling for a minute before letting the phone drop into his lap. "This is calmer than my apartment," he admitted one night, laughing softly. The dog didn't look at him. But he stayed. Children learn to approach slowly. Parents reminded them to use quiet voices. A little girl once placed a mitten carefully on the bench beside the dog. "For him," she whispered. The dog sniffed it politely, then left it where it was. He had learned something important. This wasn't about taking. It was about staying. One morning, snow fell heavier than usual. The bench nearly disappeared beneath it. People wondered if the dog would come. He did. He stood beside the bench for a moment, looking at the buried seat, then circled once before sitting in the same place as always, snow pressing cold against his fur. Someone noticed and brought a thick blanket, spreading it carefully nearby. Another person returned later with a small mat. No one spoke while they did it. The dog acknowledged each kindness with a glance. But he never moved from his place. Sometimes, when someone sat long enough, the dog would lean against them, not fully, just enough to share warmth. He did it instinctively, as if he could sense when someone needed it most. Never lingering. Never overwhelming. Just enough. A man who had lost his job came every morning for a week. He sat stiffly at first, jaw tight, hands clenched. By the third day, his shoulders relaxed. By the fifth, he smiled when he saw the dog. "You're always here," he said softly. The dog's tail tapped the snow once. As if in agreement. Animal services stopped coming. There was nothing left to check. The dog had become known. Respected. Protected. The bench became a quiet gathering point, but not a crowd. People came one at a time, sometimes two. They shared nods. Soft smiles. Understanding passed between strangers without explanation. And always, the dog watched the path. Every footstep still mattered. Every shadow still drew his gaze. But now, when nothing happened, when no one appeared, he wasn't alone in the waiting. He had companions. People who didn't ask questions. People who didn't rush him. People who understood, in their own way, what it meant to hold space for something unseen. One evening, as the light faded and the park emptied, the older woman stood to leave. She placed her hand gently on the bench, then looked down at the dog. "You're doing a good job," she said quietly. The dog looked up at her. His eyes were calm. Steady. Full. Because the waiting wasn't empty anymore. It was shared. And with each silent moment beside the bench, the bond between the dog and the people grew deeper, not through answers, but through presence. The first sign was easy to miss. It came on a quiet morning, when the snow had softened and the park smelled faintly of damp earth beneath the cold. The dog arrived as always, same path, same calm certainty, and settled beside the bench. But this time, he didn't sit right away. He paused. Just for a second. His head turned slightly, nose lifting as if catching a familiar trace in the air. Not food. Not another animal. Something older. Something remembered. A man sitting nearby noticed it. He'd been coming most mornings now, carrying a notebook he rarely opened. He watched the dog carefully. "You smell something?" the man asked softly, not expecting an answer. The dog's tail moved once. Slow. Thoughtful. Then he sat. Still, the moment lingered. Later that day, a woman wiped snow from the bench and sat down, pulling her coat tight. As she settled in, her hand brushed against something wedged between the wooden slats. She frowned and leaned closer. It was a small piece of fabric. Blue. Faded. Frayed at the edges. She lifted it gently, turning it over in her gloved hand. It looked like part of a scarf, or maybe the corner of a blanket. Something that had been there a long time, pressed and weathered. "Did you see this?" she asked the dog, half smiling. The dog looked at the fabric. Really looked at it. His ears lifted. His breathing slowed. He leaned forward and sniffed once. Then again. And then, very carefully, he sat back down. The woman felt a quiet chill that had nothing to do with the cold. She tucked the fabric back where she found it. Some things, she sensed, weren't meant to be moved yet. The next morning, someone added flowers near the bench, winter flowers, hardy and pale. No card. No explanation. Just a small sign of care. The dog noticed immediately. He sniffed the flowers. Then turned back to the path. As days passed, more small details surfaced. An older man mentioned he'd seen the bench occupied last winter, often by the same person, always at the same time of day. A guy in a long coat, he said, squinting as he tried to remember. Used to sit here for hours. Rain or shine. Alone? Someone asked. The man shook his head slowly. No. There was a dog with him. The words settled softly among those listening. A dog. People began looking at the bench differently now. At the space beside the dog. At the way he positioned himself, not randomly, but precisely where someone might sit. The college student crouched one evening, brushing snow from the ground near the bench. His fingers brushed against something hard. A metal loop. He tugged gently and uncovered part of an old leash clip, half buried and rusted from time. He stared at it for a long moment. Then he placed it back. The dog had been watching. Their eyes met. The student swallowed. You remember him, don't you? The dog didn't move. But his tail tapped the snow once. That night, a woman taped a small note to the back of the bench. Not big. Not dramatic. If you waited here with someone you loved, we remember too. The dog sat beneath it the next morning, unaware of the words but fully aware of the feeling behind them. He waited. Not because he didn't understand, but because he did. Each day brought another small sign, a memory shared, an object uncovered, a quiet realization spoken aloud. The mystery wasn't unraveling all at once. It was revealing itself gently. Like a story that wanted to be honored. Not rushed. The people who came to the bench now spoke in lower voices. They sat longer. They watched the dog with a new kind of respect. This wasn't just loyalty. It was history. It was love that had learned a routine and refused to let go. One afternoon, as snow began to fall again, the dog leaned his head briefly against the bench, the exact spot where someone's hand might once have rested. He stayed like that for a long moment. Still. Present. Waiting. And those who saw it felt the truth drawing closer, not heavy, not painful, but warm. Like a promise kept. The air had grown colder that week. But the park felt warmer than ever. Not in temperature, but in the quiet hum of connection. The dog arrived as always. His paws pressed softly into the snow, dusted with frost along the edges. He stopped just short of the bench, glanced down the path, then settled into his familiar spot. People had begun to notice the change. The way his presence affected them. The way the space beside him seemed sacred, untouched. That morning, a man approached. Not a jogger. Not a passerby. He moved with careful steps, a folder tucked under his arm, coat pulled tight against the winter chill. The dog's ears lifted immediately. He stood. Tail straightened. Breath visible in the crisp air. The man stopped a few feet away. For a moment, he studied the dog. Then, slowly, he knelt. The dog didn't move. The man extended a hand. Not for the leash. Not for attention. Simply a hand resting lightly near the dog's shoulder. The dog tilted his head. Sniffed briefly. Then leaned gently against the man's knee. A warm sigh escaped him. Not the dog's. The man's. "You've been waiting, all this time," he said softly, voice trembling. "For me." The dog's tail tapped once. Slow. Purposeful. A gentle confirmation. A small crowd had gathered, unnoticed. People watched quietly, giving space. They didn't speak. They didn't interfere. They only watched. The man removed a scarf from inside his coat, folding it carefully. He laid it on the bench. The dog sniffed it, then sat beside it, attentive but calm. "Thank you," the man whispered, his voice barely carrying. "I didn't know. I needed you." The dog leaned his head slightly, as if understanding more than words could convey. Then he looked down the path again, ears alert, tail brushing the snow. For the first time, someone had recognized the meaning behind his wait. The purpose. The memory carried quietly in his actions. It wasn't routine. It wasn't habit. It was devotion. Faith. A promise kept through winter's chill. The woman with the thermos, sitting a few feet away, exhaled slowly. She wiped her hands on her coat, feeling the warmth of something she couldn't explain. The child who had placed a mitten weeks ago stared, eyes wide. The older couple nodded softly to each other. All had witnessed a turning moment. Not dramatic. Not loud. But significant. The kind of moment that changes the way a place feels. And the way hearts remember. The man and the dog remained like that for several minutes. The snow fell lightly, each flake resting on fur, on scarf, on gloved hands. The world outside the park seemed distant, quieted by the warmth forming in that small circle beside the bench. Finally, the man spoke again. "You've been waiting for me, through everything." He ran a hand slowly along the dog's back. "I promise. I'll never forget you." The dog leaned closer, resting his head fully against the man's leg. Breath steady. Eyes soft. Content. The crowd had dispersed quietly, leaving space for the reunion to linger. No one disturbed it. No one needed to. They understood, without being told, that this moment, small and gentle, held the weight of years, memories, and unspoken promises. As the morning light touched the snow-covered branches, the dog lifted his head once, surveying the park. Then, almost imperceptibly, he looked at the man again. A soft acknowledgement. A quiet satisfaction. For the first time, it seemed like the waiting had fulfilled its purpose. And the park, once merely a backdrop for cold mornings and fleeting passersby, felt full. Alive. Connected. The turning moment wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. It was felt in the pause, the glance, the gentle press of fur against a knee. It was the moment where understanding arrived. Where devotion was recognized. Where hearts finally caught up with memory. Winter sunlight slanted through the bare trees, warming the park in soft golden streaks. The snow, once crisp and untouched, had softened into gentle mounds, forming a carpet that muffled footsteps. The bench along the center of quiet curiosity now held something more. The dog sat beside it, tail resting against the snow, eyes scanning the path as always. But there was a calm in him now, a sense that the waiting had shifted from longing to purpose fulfilled. The man from the previous chapter approached slowly, carrying a small bag. The dog rose immediately, ears alert, tail wagging softly. He pressed against the man's legs in a brief greeting, then returned to his usual spot beside the bench, patient and connected. The man knelt, placing the bag carefully beside the dog. He opened it gently and withdrew a folded blanket, blue and warm, and laid it across the bench. The dog sniffed it, leaning his head just slightly, approving. "You remember, don't you?" the man whispered. "I promised, a place to come back to." The dog's ears lifted, eyes bright but soft. He settled again beside the bench, as if to say, "Yes. I remember." And then, the full story emerged. The man began to speak, though the words weren't for anyone else but the dog. He told of a winter years ago, when he had first met the dog as a young companion. Together, they had walked this park, the bench their resting point. But life had pulled the man away, work, distance, circumstance, and the dog had remained loyal, coming back to the bench every day, waiting for his return. The dog had remembered every detail. Every step. Every scent. Every quiet moment shared on this very bench. Tears gathered in the man's eyes as he spoke. "You kept your promise too, you waited for me all this time." The dog leaned closer, resting his head against the man's shoulder, understanding in every motion. No words were needed. People passing by that morning noticed the interaction. A woman with a stroller paused, holding her breath. A young boy whispered to his mother, "Look, he's happy." The bench, the snow, the trees, everything seemed to hold its breath, honoring the quiet revelation of devotion and memory. The dog had not simply been waiting for someone. He had been keeping a promise, as much to himself as to the man. And now, the promise had been revealed. The man wrapped the dog in a gentle embrace. "You've been here for me, even when I wasn't here for you," he whispered. "I'll never forget again." The dog's tail wagged softly. His eyes glimmered with understanding and warmth. A bond stronger than absence, stronger than time, had endured. And for the first time in many winters, the bench felt truly complete. It was no longer just wood and metal in the snow. It was a testament to loyalty, to memory, to love. The dog rose briefly, stretching, then sat back down beside the bench, eyes forward, calm but connected. People in the park gave space, letting the moment breathe. They understood that some stories needed silence, not words. And as sunlight filtered through the trees, glinting on the snowflakes, the promise, once unseen, now revealed, settled over the park like a warm embrace. The waiting had ended, but the bond would remain. Forever quiet. Forever steady. Forever full of meaning. The days grew longer. The sunlight lingered on the snow-covered branches, painting the park in soft golds and warm blues. The bench, once just a simple resting spot, now carried a quiet significance. The dog arrived as always, paws pressing softly into the snow. But this time, he moved with ease, a calm confidence in every step. The man approached behind him, folding the scarf he had once brought. They paused together at the edge of the path, sharing a moment of recognition before settling near the bench. The dog pressed against the man's leg briefly, then sat beside the bench, tail brushing the snow. His eyes scanned the park, alert, yet serene, as if he had finally found peace in the rhythm of waiting and returning. People moved through the park with gentler steps now. They didn't crowd the bench. They didn't intrude. They observed quietly, understanding that this space held a story larger than themselves, a story of patience, devotion, and unspoken promises. A child placed a small pine cone on the bench, tilting her head to smile at the dog. He sniffed it politely, then rested his head on his paws, content. Nearby, a woman sipped from her thermos, watching the gentle scene, her breath visible in the crisp air, a soft smile tugging at her lips. The man spoke softly to the dog. "You waited for me, and now, we can be here together. Always." The dog lifted his head slightly, ears twitching, eyes warm. Then he leaned gently against the man's leg, a quiet affirmation of understanding, trust, and love. Winter no longer felt cold. The snow reflected warmth in every subtle detail, the sunlight catching the dog's fur, the faint blush on the man's cheeks, the soft exhale of people who had witnessed this quiet miracle. The park had become more than a place. It was a canvas of memory, devotion, and connection. And the bench, the simple, steadfast bench, had held it all. For the dog, the waiting had always been about love. For the man, the return had been a promise fulfilled. And for everyone who watched, it had become a lesson in patience, presence, and the quiet power of caring without condition. As the sun set, the park glowed in golden light. The dog rested beside the bench, the man close, their bond unspoken yet complete. Footsteps crunched softly along the path, but the energy of the park had changed. There was calm. There was warmth. And the story lingered. In the falling snow. In the soft shadows. In every heart that had witnessed the quiet miracle. The waiting was over. The promise was kept. And love, gentle and enduring, remained.